Throughout life, we all experience some form of trauma, whether that be physical or mental. We often focus on the physical because of what we do see, but we often neglect the mental because of what we don't see. My next guest, Miss Shero Forever Kennedy, experienced trauma at the early age of 4 years old. Please join me as she tells her story on how she ultimately survived. Thank you for watching. All right, welcome again to Candidly Speaking Podcast. Today, my guest is Miss Shero. I met Shero about, how long ago was it? It was like 4 years ago? I can't remember.
I think it's been about at least
It's got to be longer
5
than that.
years.
5
It's
years?
been a while.
It's been a while because, yeah, it's been a long time. So we met through a mutual person for photography. You were doing your fitness thing, and we met doing the photography. And then we just kind of kept a relationship from there. So how you been? How are things?
I have been wonderful. I can't even complain. Life is
Good.
good.
That's
Life.
good. So today we're going to kind of talk about your story. You always had an inspirational story to me. It's always been, inspirational, spiritual, everything that you do. I really enjoyed what you do. So I want to start off with the question, what really inspires Shero?
Wow. Okay, so what inspires me today is just being able to uplift women, especially, but anyone who's like feeling down and struggling to get through, challenges in life, because there was such a point in my life where I feel like I got stuck and I didn't know how I was going to get out of a rut. And being able to get myself out of that period in my life and move forward when I felt like once, I couldn't. Now it's like I don't want anyone else to feel stuck there. I don't want anyone else to be able to go, through the things that I went through and not be able to feel like you want to live another day and stuff like that. So that's what drives me and motivates me. I feel like it's my purpose. And I feel like I just feel like that's why I'm here.
Okay. So I want to go to your book. You have a book, and in your book, you kind of talk about your rough upbringing. The book is called I Changed My Mind, and it's your memoir. So can you talk a little bit about that upbringing that you had and kind of go into some of the story from how things started for you?
Oh, absolutely. So when I grew up, it was myself, my brother, and my mom for most of my life. My father, he was murdered when I was about 9 years old.
Okay.
And my mother, she suffered from depression from the time, like ever since I've known, she's always struggled with depression. When I was born, she had postpartum depression, and then she had clinical depression for most of what I know, like up until the day that she passed away, which was a few years ago. And I didn't have a relationship with her. Like I didn't have the type of mother-daughter relationship where I felt like I could go to her and be like, hey mom, um, talk about boys, or she was very strict. She was the do as I say and not as I do type of person. And so I felt alone most of my childhood. I literally felt like I was raising myself. And my brother and I, being a boy and a girl, we didn't really have the relationship that we have now. When I was younger, we kind of were just navigating two separate lives. And to be honest with you, when I started dating, or when I started to get that attention from boys, and I didn't know how to handle it. So anything that felt like love or looked like love to me, like I was clinging on to it. And I believe that's what really started me on that trajectory to where I was just falling for any and everything. And I became a target for for guys looking for, someone easy to manipulate, that kind of thing. Um, so I wrote the book later on after I had fallen very hard in life. And my first relationship was a very abusive relationship. It was physically abusive. I left home and I started living with this guy. And this was before the abuse started. Like, I didn't recognize it. But once I moved out, oof, it was a very it wasn't that I'd never seen it before, because my mother had been in abusive relationships from the time I was about 5 or 6 years old. And so I'd seen it before, but it was one of those things where I was ashamed and embarrassed, and I didn't want to go back home because I felt like I didn't want to hear, "Oh, I told you so." And I just felt like I could kind of navigate it on my own. And then, like I said, my mother and I, we didn't have that type of relationship where I could go to her. So the only way that I was able to escape that relationship was to leave. And I went into the Air Force. Like, I snuck, like, one day, it was just too much. One day, he came home from work and he didn't like the fact that I was on the phone. And it just, he lost it. He lost it. He took the phone from me, he threw it, and like he beat me like with his fist. He kicked me. But it's not that had not happened before, but this time was different because he spit on me. And when that happened, it was just like everything that was inside of me that was there was just gone. And that's when I realized, I was like, damn, this man hates me. Like, he literally hates me. Who would spit on someone? And that's when I had to go. I had to go. I saw my recruiter one night, in the middle of the night, after that had happened. And like, I saw my recruiter, I was like, I gotta go. And he was frustrated with me because I had told him that before, and I went all the way through like MEPS, and I said I was ready, and then I got scared. I was like, I don't know if I want to do this, and I was afraid, so I didn't go before.
So your recruiter was frustrated with you?
Oh yeah, he was frustrated because he didn't believe me. He was just like, "You're gonna make me look like a fool if you don't go." But at this point, it was like I had no other choice. So he was like, "Well, listen, if you're serious, I have a bus leaving at 5 a.m. It's going to Raleigh. So if you're serious, then you'll be ready to go at 5 a.m." And the next morning. And so I did. I left.
So it was going to Raleigh. Where were you located at this time?
I was born in Fayetteville, North Carolina. So that's where I lived for up until that point.
Okay, I asked because my MEPS was at Raleigh also. So that's why I was like, wait, where were you at in Raleigh?
Yeah.
So let's go back a little bit, because you mentioned the abuse didn't get bad until you moved out. So I just want to clarify, you're referencing you were dating the person while you were living with your mom, but eventually as you and your mom were going back and forth, you decided to move in with the person, and that's when you realized how intense the abuse was, when you actually moved in with
that's
him,
when
right?
it started, because he had me then. Like, I was gone. I was up from under my mother's, supervision, and, she never allowed, it was never okay for me to date this guy. You know what I mean? I hadn't even graduated high school yet when we started dating. So for her, she was like, no, you're not doing it. And I was so adamant, I was going to do my own thing. So yeah, this happened once I left, and he saw the opportunity to be able to have control, like complete control over me. And that's when the abuse started.
So not to go too much into what I read in your book, I only was able to read like the first part, but you kind of talk a little bit about the relationship, how you began to realize that your mom wasn't paying any attention to you, and it just you boiled over that last night where you were like, okay, I'm done. You don't care about me. And the reason why I want to mention this is because I think a lot of teenagers nowadays, I'm on my son all the time, and you probably heard me on the phone a few times with him. I'm on him all the time. And I see a lot of parents who are the opposite of that these days. So what would you say to parents who may not be in the same situation as your mom, suffering from depression and things, but what would you say to parents today who are allowing their kids? One of the things that frustrates my son to no end now is he wants to go to football games. And I'm like, I know what I was doing at 14. I know how I was at 14. And I'm not allowing you to go by yourself. If you go to a football game, I will accompany you at the football game because I know what happens when you start to hit these ages. So what
Right.
would you say to parents? Would you encourage parents maybe not to be helicopter, but would you encourage them to be more involved in their kids' lives?
I do. I really do. And I honestly, let me just say this. Well, first of all, the gentleman that I'm speaking of, we met at a football game.
Wow.
We met at a football game and I was by myself.
Wow.
So, and not to say that you can control every aspect of your child's life. And, you know, teenagers are going to do what teenagers are going to do to an extent. But most of us want that. We want to know that you care, no matter how combative it seems like we are. We need that and we want that, whether we state it or not. And I feel like communication is everything. When your child knows that he or she can go and ask you anything and never feel like there's going to be a judgment or feel afraid to bring up a conversation or any topic, then I feel like that is the single most important thing that you can do, is just being available to talk to, because they're going to talk to somebody.
Yeah.
They're going to talk to somebody. And if you think about it, you can ask, you know, I'm a millennial. I think what millennials are born from, what, 1980s to 19.
I think it's 96 or 95, something mid 90s somewhere.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm a millennial. If you ask any millennial, right, how did you first learn about sex? A lot of them will tell you it wasn't their parents. It was like our friends at school. You know, that's how I heard things. That's how I learned what certain terms were. You know, all this terminology that I got, the first time I heard it was from my friends. Now, if you don't want that to be the case, you got to be your kids' friends to the punch, you know. And sometimes that's saying and having these conversations earlier than what you think is necessary. But I think one of the biggest mistakes that I see is like, you know, I have friends who are like, oh no, I'm going to wait till he or she turns this age before I have this conversation. And in my mind, you know, I'm always reserved to, you know, give my opinion when it's not asked, when it comes to other people who have children. But I will say this, I think that the age that we think is appropriate is a little, like, you might as well just kind of scale that back a little bit, because you would be surprised. I got male attention from as early as 9 years old, as creepy as that sounds, but you would be surprised what's out there. And also the fact that your child's not going to tell you if something feels uncomfortable. Your child's not going to tell you if something feels weird. And with social media being the way that it is, and with people just having underlying agendas, I think that communication is everything. And your child's never too young to learn about anything. That's how I feel, because it's better that it come from you than a complete total stranger. Like, no. And that's my opinion on that, and I strongly stand by that.
No, I think I agree with you, because my son, he hates it. I talk to him about it all the time, even when he doesn't want to. I ask him, hey, you know, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? What are you guys doing here? What are you guys doing? He's like, oh, Dad, I don't want to talk about it. I'm like, okay, well, we're going to talk about it, because I know you're out there thinking it, and I know you're out there dealing with it. And I've seen, just as an observer, as a coach, just going on different, you know, trips for basketball, you see it all the time. You see the guys in the corner, you see the girls in the corner. And I think today, girls are a lot more aggressive than they were when I was growing up. So it's really a strange thing. But I just wanted to clarify some of those things. So you were saying that you ended up talking to the recruiter, and the recruiter was not believing you, and he said, hey, 5 a.m. tomorrow, I got a bus going out to Raleigh. But by the way, I remember taking the bus to Raleigh, and it took us like 10 hours to get to Raleigh or something. And we're literally, I forget how far we are from Raleigh, but it took so long. I hated that bus ride. Anyway, continue your story. I did.
Well, the thing for me, I think Raleigh is about an hour away from Fayetteville. It's not that far, so that wasn't too bad for me. But yeah, so that's when I went to the Air Force. I left because I was just like, if I don't leave, he's gonna kill me. It got so bad that I was afraid. I was so afraid of him, you know, like him and his strength, and then his issues with anger. And I fled. I was like, I cannot go back to the situation. So I went to the Air Force and it was great. I mean, I know to this day that is the best decision I ever made for my life. It provided me with opportunities to travel, to, get an education, all this stuff. But while there, and, during this time of transition in my life, mind you, this had been the only relationship that I'd known is, the worst one, So when I did start dating, I didn't really have a barometer of what is good versus not. All I knew is I don't ever want to be treated like that again. So any other type of abuse, I couldn't necessarily recognize. If it was emotional, I wasn't really going to recognize it. And so I think that is how I got into the next to my second relationship. So I won't give too much away, but like that relationship that I got into was what led me to spiral completely out of control. I met him while I was enlisted, and he sold drugs. He sold ecstasy. And I didn't know. I knew that he sold drugs. Eventually, he told me, he was transparent about it. But at that time, I was very reckless. And when I met him, like I was like, oh, this is the one. Because though I was young, he treated me so much better than what I had been accustomed to. He was buying me flowers. Like he was affirming me in ways that I never been affirmed before. And mind you, my self-esteem had still been very, very low. So when I met him, I was just like, oh, this is golden. And I imagined that I never thought we wouldn't be together. So fast forward, to a couple years down in our relationship. It wasn't even a couple years because I think it was like maybe a year and a half when we got together. We were still together and had gone to 2 different bases. He was still selling illegal drugs, and then I think that's when he got the idea that it would be smart to use me to intercept, just in case he was to get caught with these drugs. Well, anyway, I was arrested because I got caught picking them up from the post office.
So he was in the military as well?
He was.
Okay.
When this happened, he'd gone into the National Guard. So he was no longer active duty,
Gotcha.
But I was.
Okay.
I was.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. So you got arrested for when you were picking him up, and he got arrested at the same time, or you said you were picking up something?
Oh no, he didn't get arrested. He did not get arrested. It was
Really?
just me. Okay.
And you both were in the car?
He wasn't even with me. So what he would do is he would mail the drugs to me.
I see. Okay.
I would pick them up from a post office.
I see.
I would drive them by myself to his location because we didn't live in the same state.
Okay.
Right. So, but me and my 19-year-old brain did not compute that. Why is he sending them to you instead of just mailing them directly to him? What sense does that make? Like, my little brain did not compute any of that. Okay. Yeah. And I did it like recklessly. I never thought, and till this day, I don't understand how you could be so reckless just with life in general, but I was. I never thought about what I was doing. I never even thought like, oh, if you get caught with this, what could happen to you? Never entered my mind. And I think I had so much blind trust in him that I just trusted that I was safe. He made me feel like very safe and like he's got it,
So I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just never questioned it. So when I got arrested, I was standing outside of the post office. Mind you, he'd been so used to mailing these drugs to me that he didn't even, he got to the point where he never said, hey, I'm going to do such and such, ABC. He would just call me and be like, hey, I need you to go to the post office and I need you to pick this box up. And so when you visit this weekend, I need you to bring them to me. So I got a phone call one Saturday morning and he was like, hey, I need you to go to the post office. Or maybe it was Friday, I can't remember. But I didn't expect it because I had just had a surgery on my back. And I was on like, I don't know, some, those painkillers that knock you out. I was on one of those. I think it was like, was it Darvocet? I don't know. And I was so loopy. I just remember he called. He was like, no, I need you to go right now. And he was so rude about it. But I didn't even expect for him to do that. And so I was like, all right, I'll go. So I go to the post office and I'm looking for this package and it's not there. So I go to the front desk and I'm like, hey, I'm looking for a package. And the lady's like, oh, she's like, I'm so sorry, but it's not here. But if you come back at 2:00, then, so she's like, I'll call you around 2. So I called him and I was like, yeah, the lady said it's not there. She said she'll call me around 2 when the mail arrives. And he was like, what? Like, he could not believe that she was going to call me. Something was fishy, but I didn't know, like I said, I was so oblivious. She calls, like she said she's going to call. And I was like, okay. And I go to the post office to pick it up. Little did I know that she needed that time so that she could call the feds so that they could come from Kansas City and prepare to arrest me on spot when I got there to the post office. Wow. So that's how that happened. And I just remember standing there. I pulled up and I remember my name being called and I look around and like people are just running towards me. And then I get arrested. And at that point, that is the first time I ever thought like, whoa, this is serious. And even then it wasn't, even then I didn't understand the severity. It took so long for me to understand how serious the situation really was. So I will say this, at that time, back in the day, at that time, this was when our soldiers, I don't know if you remember when our soldiers were being accused of torturing some Iraqi.
I do. Where they were like okay. Piling them up naked and all that stuff.
Yeah. So our soldiers were being accused of doing that, like torturing these detainees. And it was something that, Bush was taking a lot of heat for it because apparently he said some things that made our soldiers think that it was okay to do that. So anyway, we couldn't afford any negative press. And when this happened, we were like, the military was just not, other countries were, talking bad about us. We just couldn't afford anything else negative to happen on our soil. And then when this happened with me, it was just like one more thing. And that's why it was such a big deal. But like I still can compute, right? I didn't understand how big my case was until I probably say it was years later. It was years later. I had $250,000 worth of ecstasy in my hands. And that carried a 30-year prison sentence. My attorney at the time, who was my attorney was retained by my boyfriend at the time. He was the same attorney. He represented those soldiers. So I had no idea. Like I was just in a cloud, just in a freaking cloud. But it's just one of those things. I look back now and I'm like, God, like you just kept me through so much. So fast forward, it ended up being like this long drawn out case. And no, he did not get arrested. Actually, I was going to have to take the heat for all of it. They can prove that he did anything because I was the one with the drugs in my hand. And there was no link to him other than me confessing that he sent it to me. That was it. And I had no other information to give to them because he was smart about it. He didn't tell me anything. He was just like, hey, I need you to do this for me. So I didn't have the details to be able to tell them. And that's the first time I ever thought to myself that he may have set me up. That's the first time that I ever thought, well, you don't really know him. And, I had a cell phone. When you have a cell phone, I didn't even know his number. Okay. So I'm arrested. I'm sitting in this jail cell and I'm like, surely they're going to let me make a phone call. But then I'm like, I don't even have his number to call him. I could not get in touch with him. And it took me I think it took me a couple of days. I can't remember. It took me a long time to just be able to remember a number, which was there's number to contact him so that I could let him know, hey, I've been arrested. And even at that point, I didn't know whether I would reach him or if he had set me up and just left.
And you were stationed in Colorado at the time?
No, I was stationed in Missouri at the time. I was at White States.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Got it. So to kind of go back a little bit, so basically at this point, you have fallen into a relationship with this man. How much of that, I mean, I think the link is might be obvious, but how much of that do you think really played into the emotional trauma that you had already faced by going to the first man that you meet and falling into doing everything that he wanted you to do? How much did your previous emotional trauma play into that? And not even emotional, the physical trauma that you faced as well.
Okay. A lot. I just think that I never really had a chance to be my own person and to walk in, walk into my journey as my own person without someone else's influence or them trying to influence me in certain ways. And I was so impressionable, not even realizing that I was, but it played a major role. And to backtrack, even prior, I didn't mention this, it's in the book, but I was sexually abused when I was 4, from the time I was 4 to around the age of, I want to say 9 years old. And so that abuse leading on to the relationship with, my first relationship. And then, the relationship that I had later on with, I'm telling you, I don't feel like I ever had the chance to look in the mirror and say, this is who I am. I didn't know who I was still.
Okay. So now circling back and you look at your young self, and I can hear, I talk to people, quite a bit, and some people I talk to a lot of people that don't side with me because it gives me a good understanding, but I can hear a lot of people in my ear saying right now, not literally, but I can hear a lot of people saying, well, you're just making excuses. Suck it up, get over it. It happened. You were abused when you were this age. What would you say to those people who don't understand the connection of abuse? Because I would say up until I was maybe, I don't know, 20 years old, I didn't really realize how much of an impact it actually had on a person, not just physical abuse. I've learned emotional abuse is way over, way overboard. And what I mean by that is it takes such a toll on a person from the emotional abuse, because they're all physical abuse. It hurts, it's bad, it hurts, you have a few scars, but that emotional abuse, it lasts forever. It's forever. And I'm like, when I first learned that and saw that in action, my mind completely changed about the impacts of emotional abuse.
Yeah. I mean, hence the reason why I stayed so long with this one person while he was being physically abusive. But the minute he did what he did, when he spit on me, it was emotional. It was I could see that he had no emotional connection with me and did not care for me. And that's when I left. I think that at our core as human beings, we want to feel love. And when we don't, and when someone mistreats us that way and hurts us emotionally, it has an impact that can last a lifetime. It really does. And to people who say that it doesn't or get over it, I've heard it before. And I can't say that, some people just don't understand. I can't blame you for your ignorance and not understanding what it's like. I would say to you, thank God that you don't understand that type of pain, because until you do, I don't really feel like you will ever grasp how strong you have to be to push forward. It really does take a strong person to get through that type of abuse and to see themselves in a way that is different than what somebody told you that you were. And for me, I think that is why I walk in my purpose differently now. And I want people to see, like, your life doesn't have to be that. You can experience joy. You can wake up in the morning and be happy. You can get through depression. You can get through anxiety. And even through your trauma, you can survive and be whole. Be whole. I had what is called dissociative amnesia. And that is when something traumatic happens and you, there are spots where it's blank and you don't remember what happened. But the problem was things would show up in my life later on, and I would behave in ways that I couldn't explain. And so once I figured it out, when I started going to counseling, I was embarrassed by it because I just kind of felt like other people could see a side of me that I couldn't see. Other people could see me reacting in ways that I wasn't even aware of. And that's what abuse can do. And that's how it can change your emotional and not emotional. That's how it can affect the way you are and the way you deal with your relationships with other people. And not everybody understands that.
Okay. So before we continue in your story, let's give a little encouragement to someone who may be going through what you went through. How do you get to a person to tell them, hey, you may want to seek counseling? Because counseling is not a popular term. It's becoming popular. It's almost becoming, I hate to say this, it's almost becoming a fad, because you'll see people all the time, well, I talk to my therapist, talk to my counselor. And some people do it and it's good, it's great. But I think some people just kind of toss it out there. But I personally think it's an important thing. So what would you say to that person when they're like, I don't want to seek a counselor? Because first of all, what I've learned is it's not that so much of people being embarrassed. They don't want to tell people just their story because of how it makes them feel internally. So It's not so much about embarrassing because I don't know you. I don't care how you see me. But internally, I just don't want to relive this for an hour sitting in, as they say, on the couch, So what would you say to someone who's thinking about going to see counseling or trying to leave a situation and they just feel like they can't?
Ooh, well, that's two separate. Okay, so let me break this down. As far as seeing a counselor or speaking to someone, it's a cleansing. It's almost as if you're feeling emotions and you never allow those emotions to, like, that you feel this way, but you never let it out. Everybody needs a good cry. Everybody needs to acknowledge their feelings, that they are real, because that's what makes you human. And talking to someone, even, as you say, like, some people are treating it as if it's a fad. Well, that's good. I see that as a good thing, because for so long, especially in the Black community, therapy has been this thing where it's been a taboo. People think that something's wrong with you because you want therapy and you want to talk to someone, when it's one of the best things you could ever do. And the truth is, we'll do things like we'll talk our friend's head off. We'll call up a girlfriend and talk her head off about what's going on, but she's not our therapist. And so we've been doing these with the wrong person. And a lot of times that can backfire, especially when the person is not giving good advice. And sometimes we don't necessarily need advice. We just need to let it out. And for me, being able to sit down and speak to someone and just let it out that's the first part of it, is being able to cleanse and just let it out. Sometimes you don't need to hear advice as to what to do. And therapists don't do that. They don't sit down and say, oh, you need to do this, and this. They allow you to kind of become self-aware. And like I said, remember I told you I wasn't self-aware. I didn't even know, I had no idea how my childhood and the things that had happened in my childhood affected the way I had been living, the way I showed up in life, how I had how I was in my relationships. I had no idea. And it's important for us all to see that. But as Black people, we've always been raised to think that therapy is bad, that if you need to see someone that you're crazy. Everybody's got someone that they have heard in their family, oh, they're a little off. That's what we've heard, you know, as Black people. And I think that especially for me, that's what steered me away from getting help for so long. I didn't want to be the crazy one. I didn't want to. I remember when I felt like I needed to see a therapist, I hated the fact that on the door of the clinic, it would say mental health clinic. I didn't want to go in there. I didn't want to be seen walking in that door because I felt like if someone saw me going in there to mental health, they would assume the worst. They would assume that I was crazy. And I could not handle the thought of someone thinking that I was crazy. And that sucks. It sucks to think that would keep me from getting the help that I need. And I don't even know what prompted me to actually make that decision. I'm so glad I did. But I was still scared. Even when I did, I was still scared. I was still opening the door looking like, you know, I didn't want anyone to see me. And I don't think that it's fair that we sometimes care about what people think so much that we will stay stuck and that we won't get the help that we need and continue to hurt and continue to feel depressed and suicidal and to have these feelings of anxiety while other people are living their own lives. And, no matter where you go, you're gonna have people that are gonna judge you. You're gonna have people that don't like you. And I think that we just need to start living for ourselves.
I think in the world that we live in today, I think we all face some sort of anxiety or something because the world is just set up like that today, especially with the whole virus and everything. I think we all face some level. I mean, you may be one of those people who don't care about getting vaccinated or not, but you still have some level of, well, I don't want my kids to get it. I don't want this person to get it. I don't want my grandparents or my parents to get it. So I think today's environment leads everyone to some level of anxiety. So let's go back to, so you're now at the point of your story, you're in prison, and what are your thoughts? And at this point, I think you say your mother passed about 4 years ago, but at this point, were you communicating with your mom at all? I know you said you were embarrassed at times to talk to her, didn't want to go back and talk to her. At this point, did you have an opportunity to reach out to your mother?
So I did, and our conversations, we didn't have a relationship. Like, it was very detached. Mm-hmm. So I did call her and let her know what had happened, but she was just like, sorry to hear that. I'm sorry to hear that. And I don't know what I expected to hear, but it was not like I knew that she wouldn't be there. I didn't really expect for her to be able to help me, especially financially. She wasn't even in a position financially to be able to help me. So I'm not even sure how or if that really affected me, because I was so detached from her. I didn't really expect much anyway.
So yeah. Would you say that was more of a, because I can see it this way and it may not be that way, but would you say it was more of a thing, you're sitting there and you're like, okay, call my mom, I just need to confirm that I'm not going to be able to rely on her, so I can kind of move forward and know that I have to kind of get through this on my own?
Yeah. Okay. That was confirmation.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So now we move forward past all of that stuff, because when I met you, I didn't learn this story for a while, but now you move past all that stuff. What would you say propelled you to, because it sounds like actually, before we go to that, you said that it was a maximum penalty of 30 years. So how, and you had this representative or this attorney. So how did it end up going not from 30 years? Because clearly it didn't take, it wasn't 30 years. So how did you end up not serving 30 years in that, for that sentence?
Okay, so I actually was arrested for this case twice. I won't give the whole story away. I talk about the details of how it happened
Okay.
up until that point in the book. So I was released once, and I thought that, this was over. And then it got picked up again as a federal case. So there's no such thing as double jeopardy when it comes to like state and federal.
The federal, yeah.
Yeah, so it got released from the state, and then I think 3 months later or something like that, I was rearrested. And so that is when they started looking more into him. So he ended up having to pretty much confess up to his part in this. And that is how I was able to get time served and not have to do a 30-year sentence. Prior to that point, my attorney was like, listen, you're gonna have to take a plea because it's not looking good for you right now. And he was like, the best I can do for you is 15. So in my mind, I'm like, I don't want to do no time. Like, I'm not trying to do any time. And for me at that age and that point in my life, it was just devastating because I'm thinking, I don't even know if I can do 5 minutes in a prison, and it's just, I couldn't compute the idea of sitting behind bars. And then I'm thinking, what's life going to be like for me when I get out? What's life going to be like for me? Is he still going to be there? Is anybody going to be there for me when I get out? Because I started feeling very lonely. I started feeling like, well, if I don't have him, who do I have? Because like I said, the relationship I had with my mother was very detached. I didn't have many friends at the time. And then when this happened, I pretty much just, everybody was ghost. I had no friends. So I was clinging to him even more at this point because I felt like he's all I had. So that's how it ended up being or going from a 30-year prison sentence to me only having to get time served, and then also getting 2 years of probation. And even after that, dealing with the fact that, now I am a convicted felon, couldn't get a job. It was just torture. It was just torture from me. And it did a lot to like my self-esteem. I just kind of felt like, what am I gonna do with my life? And for a long time, like I sat with that, and it would just bug me and eat at me every single day. And no one knew that I was dealing with this, but like I had a lot of issues with self-worth for a really long time.
Wow. So that first time you got arrested, how did the Air Force process you? Did they process you immediately out at that point, or did they kind of wait to see what more would happen? Okay.
So I was told that I was going to be court-martialed and that the Air Force was going to, that basically I would have to go through their, system. But, and so they sent me to like a medium security prison as a holding situation because I was still active duty. And because they didn't know what they were going to do with me. They didn't know who was going to who my case belonged to. And I had no idea what was happening. And at that time I did not have an attorney. So I had to sit there for a couple of weeks in this minimum security prison. And they decided, like, I was coming up on having the option to either re-enlist or get out. Because I had no idea what was going to happen with me, I was so afraid. I was like, I gotta get out because I didn't know. I'm like, how many years am I going to do? So I decided to get out. I didn't care whether I would get a dishonorable discharge or anything like that. At the time, though, I was new to this base. I think I had been at that base for maybe a few months. Okay. I was brand new. I didn't know a lot of people. I had met a couple of, people from work that, I'd become, like, I don't want to say friends, but, really cool with. I didn't know them. So I was teaching after I would get off work, I would go teach like spinning classes and stuff like that. So I, taught classes after work. So some people knew my face because of that, but no one really knew who I was. And when it was time for me to go before the commander to see like what he was going to do with me, because I, clearly was going to get out. At this point, I just needed to know what kind of discharge am I looking at. And when I go before the commander, he is looking at me. He's like, "Listen, I don't know what you got yourself into, but clearly you got some people on this base who really think highly of you," which I had no idea. I wasn't there that long.
Right.
And apparently, one of the master sergeants and his wife had signed a petition to make sure that I didn't get a dishonorable discharge because they felt as though I was a person of good character. And that meant a lot to me. Like I cried because like not having known many people at this base, for someone to stand up for me who put himself on the line like that, like mind you, my face was all over the news. And in the newspaper, it said there was a title, largest drug bust in the Midwest. I didn't know at the time this was happening because, I'm behind bars. So I don't know what's going on in the outside world. I find out this stuff later. And yeah, it was crazy to find out that he did that for me. And to this day, like, I am so appreciative because now that he did that, it just made me feel, it gave me a second wind at that point when I needed it. Because when I tell you I was at one of my lowest points, I didn't want to live anymore. Like I was extremely depressed and at times like just suicidal. Like I didn't even want to wake up and get out of bed because everybody knew who I was. No one was trying to talk to me. I got kicked out of my apartment. The leasing agent was like, "Yeah, you gotta go." She put a lock on my door. I couldn't even get back in my apartment when I was released from that prison to go back to the base.
So I just want to clarify something. So when you were arrested, they were trying to decide if you pretty much belong under military jurisdiction or the federal, or
Right.
I mean, federal is military, but there's a whole another side of the military. So they were trying to figure that out.
Yeah.
Okay.
The state. And so because I was going up because I still had the option to, go ahead and get out of the military or re-enlist, I chose to just go ahead and part because I didn't know what I was looking at. And I didn't want to stick around to find out.
Yeah.
So he gave me a dishonorable discharge, and basically that left the state. Everything was in the state's hands at that point.
Okay. So I also want to highlight something here because I think a lot of people see people that make some type of mistake in their lives, and a lot of us make mistakes early in life, and some of us continue to make those mistakes, but oftentimes it's equated to that person being a bad person or a person that has bad character. And I think your story kind of highlights the fact that when someone is making a bad decision or making mistakes, doesn't always make them a bad person. They're just a person that's made some bad decisions. Now, I will say, sometimes those decisions have like major effects. And I'm a firm believer in mistakes versus, you did something intentional and you just got caught. So there is a difference. But, sometimes people are like in your situation, you're just caught up into your environment, and that's kind of what happens. So I think that's a point that I really want to highlight as well, just because you see someone out here. And I think for our kids, there's a local guy here. He does this wonderful things for all these kids because one thing he recognized is that he made mistakes and someone had to be there to help him. I actually posted a quote the other day about everyone needs someone to help them get to that next phase. And I think it's amazing that you had someone to help you get to that next phase, even if they didn't know much about you. But I'm sure they knew enough to see, hey, this young lady here, She's not going to go harm a lot of people. She got caught up in a bad situation.
Yeah. And I think too, I'm glad that you said that, because, you know, if I had to tell these young people anything, first of all, one mistake can change the entire trajectory of your whole life. I planned to retire. You know, I had plans that did not involve going to prison. Okay. So that is not something that I expected would happen. And because I made that decision that was not the best decision, I had to leave. I can no longer serve in the Air Force the way that I once did. And so a lot of people don't really realize that it takes a lot of work to restore your character once it's been damaged, especially when it's been done in public, in the public eye. And I tell people that all the time. Think about Monica Lewinsky. What do you think about? To this day, when you think about her, you're automatically associating her with what happened. The woman was 22 years old.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? She was 22. She made a mistake. And a lot of us make mistakes, even worse than what she did. Look at what I did, you know? But the thing is, because she was in the public eye, she was 22. She fell in love with someone. It just happened to be the president of the United States. And now forever she's paying for that. Forever people are associating her, and some people will never take her seriously because that happened. Think about Robin Givens and Mike Tyson. It's like when you do these things, you're attached to the things that people remember. You know, if it becomes big in the public eye, it's hard for people to erase that. So for me, I knew for a lot of people who were there at that moment, it's hard for them to get past what happened, right? I'm the girl who got caught with the drugs, who was seen walking on base in an orange jumpsuit and shackles and handcuffs. And they will never be able to get that image out of their mind. I'm not responsible for that because I can't control what people, you know, think that were there at that time, but I can control the person that I am today. And I can't control the person that I want to be moving forward. And I can learn from that. So to the young people, I would say it's so important to be intentional about decisions that you made, because at the end of the day, no one cares about what happened to me when I was 4 years old to 9 years old. And that is true. You know, a lot of people can say, yeah, it happened, move on. It's easier said than done. And it's not a process that you can just be like, okay, I'm going to change my mindset and things are going to be different. So that is why I say it's so important for you to know who you are, have a good tribe of positive people around you, and to know, you know, have love for yourself. Because if you don't love yourself enough, then someone else will try to determine your value, as with what happened to me. And I think that it took me until I was about 33 years old to realize that how much it had affected my life.
So for everyone out there that want to read the rest of the story, make sure you go grab her book, I Changed My Mind. It's available on Amazon, correct?
It is.
Amazon, okay, called I Changed My Mind. It's her memoir. I'll post it on here as well. So now we've gotten through that bad stuff. Now it's time for you to turn your life around. So can you talk about how you change your life around to get you where you are today?
Well, so I had to make decisions that I was afraid to make. Sometimes I think that when it comes time to make a decision that you know is going to be what's best for you, you are afraid because it's something that you've never done before. And that can either hold you back or it can make you kind of just run forward and see where it takes you. A lot of us, we allow the fear to keep us stagnant. We allow that fear to make us, you know, continue to stay stuck. But for me, I was so tired of not moving forward. And one day, honestly, I woke up and I was like, I didn't like the person I saw when I looked in the mirror. I didn't like being depressed. I didn't like feeling inadequate. And I thought to myself, like, what do I need to do better? And for me, it was actually picking up and moving out of the state that I was living in and starting over. And, you know, I had all of the roadblocks in my mind just coming at me. What are you gonna do about money? What are you gonna do about a job? What are you gonna do about this? What are you gonna do about that? And honestly, I just had to go for it. I was like, I'll figure it out. But one thing I do know is I can't stay here. And I think that once you put it in your mind where you want to go, how you get there is none of your business. I tell people that all the time because that's what faith is. Faith is saying, this is what I want, and I trust God to get me there. And the vehicle that it takes to get you from A to B, that is what you cannot be concerned with. That is what you cannot worry about. And so I did. I put my faith in God, and I was just like, God, I need you. And that is when I made the decision to leave and start over. And so now, though it has not been easy, it's not going to be the easiest thing to do is, you know, conquer your fears. But I will say this, I'm a speaker, I'm an author, I am a life coach now. And for that, I thank God, because even the things that I prayed for, my life, I got better. He's blessed me with so much better than what I ever thought I could have. And I never, you know, it is written in the Bible where it says that he will bless you with things that he will give you more than what you can even ask or think. And I'm thinking to myself, more than what I could ask or think. And that's just to say that even when in your mind you say, I want this or I want that, God has so much of a better plan for you. Think about it. I was in a physically abusive relationship, and the best I could think of was to be with someone who didn't hit me. Like, to me, that was good. I was like, God, I just want to be with someone who don't hit me. That's not a blessing.
Right.
It's not a blessing to say that I want to be in a relationship with someone who doesn't hit me. How about I want a relationship with someone who loves me? But my mindset, like, there is a such thing as a poverty mindset. And you can have a poverty mindset when it comes to your relationships, to your finances, your spiritual growth. I had such a poverty mindset when it came to what I wanted in my relationships because I didn't know any different. I'd never seen anything different. I didn't grow up with my father in the house. I didn't grow up having my mother tell me, you know, I love you. So for me, I was just like, hey, God, you know, this time around, can I just be with someone who doesn't hit me? And for me to wake up and realize that my mind, that's why he says more than what you can ask or think, because sometimes your thinking is so limited, and that is caused by your environment, and you don't even realize it.
So can you describe the poverty mindset? Can you give like a definition or, you know, kind of what that is for people that may not have ever heard that term? I've heard that term before, but can you give a brief definition of what that means?
So the poverty mindset is basically your mind. If you think right now, what you want for your life, your mind has limitations sometimes. And my coach said it best. My speaking coach, Warren Ryan, he says to me, I want you to think about where you see yourself with your speaking career. And he goes, don't be realistic. And when he first said that, I thought to myself, like, I thought that's silly. That makes no sense. But what he was saying when he says that, don't be realistic, is think outside the box. Make sure that what you're asking for is something that most people think is unreachable, because your mind will naturally put limits on where it goes, right? If you ask me, I don't know, 10 years ago, where I saw myself as far as like my finances, what are your financial goals? I might have told you that $10,000 a month was a lot and enough for me, but that was my poverty mindset. And I might not have said that. because I didn't think it was achievable. I didn't think it was something easy to do because I was struggling so much as it is that it almost felt as if, oh, I can never achieve that. That's not something God will bless me with. And until I learned to change the way I, change my thinking, now it's like $10,000 a month. No. Like now my mind is willing to go further. And I've noticed that the more that you condition your mind to think outside of these realms and limitations, the more you'll realize that things just come to you. But belief is everything. But it's that faith, exercising that faith. And I tell people all the time, when you're kids and you want things from your parents, you're going to get it. Like in your mind, you're like, mommy, daddy, I want this, I want that. I'm pretty sure your son is like asking for things or making plans with no vehicle, no money, and no permission, right? That's what kids do. They make plans. And I always tell people, when it comes to like your faith and your vision and your purpose, what is it that you want? What do you want to do? You have to have that faith to know that I'm going to make these plans. I'm not going to have the money to do it, the vehicle, or the permission, but I know God is going to make a way. So having that faith, like children have faith in their parents, just knowing like it's going to happen. This is what I want for my birthday. I want this. All I got to do is ask my dad. All I got to do is ask my mom. And that's what it is. It's like, for me, I'm asking the Father, but I'm putting my faith in him, knowing that he is going to make a way for me to get there, and that he is going to bless me and keep me safe through the process.
Right. So I think, there is a scripture also, I can't remember if it's Matthew or Mark, but I know it's Matthew or Mark 6:33, where it talks about, the birds of the air, they don't worry about where their food is going to come from.
Yes.
They don't worry about where their food is going to come from because they just day to day, they're just going after it day to day. And I think that's Matthew 6:33, but, I'm really bad at quoting scriptures. So, so to get back to the poverty mindset though, so you would say that the poverty mindset is more, it's not so much about the poverty, it's more about the mindset that when you're comparing to someone who may be in like extreme poverty, like let's say you go to a foreign country, I won't even mention any particular country, you go to a foreign third world type country and they're in such poverty that they can't even imagine themselves outside of it, so they can't even see outside of it. So would you say that's what so in any other, with any other situation, it could be the same thing. You just can't, so in your abusive relationship, that poverty mentality said, I just can't see myself in anything else. And then even when you got into the relationship with the whole, the arrested situation, you still kind of was leaning back to him because you couldn't see anything else. Okay.
The poverty mindset is your inability to see outside of your own experiences.
Okay.
Because you've never experienced it. It's like you can't see it.
Right.
You don't even know that it really can exist for you. You feel like it's for other people. You feel like you never get past that type of lifestyle. And even growing up, like with no money, I never felt like, I was just like dreaming that I could get out of that, but it never felt real. It almost felt like, sounds good, but I wasn't believing that it could happen for me. I wasn't believing that I could live a lifestyle that was better than what I had known in my life.
So I will say, ever since I've known you, and this is a good thing, you've been like a serial entrepreneur, because I'm kind of the same way. I'm always doing something. You're an author. I know you were fitness. I know we had the conversation about the pandemic, what it's done to both of us fitness wise, but you've done all these things, and you're speaking and you're doing a lot of stuff, and I see you're rebranding. I've been following that, and that's all great as well. So how do you keep going? Like, how do you keep moving? It's like you're never stopping, which is not a bad thing. You're doing all these great things, and you come from all of that we just went through. So what keeps you going?
I don't want to ever go back.
Mm.
I don't ever go back. I feel like um, now my why is different. You know, like I'm living a life now where it's about breaking generational curses. I never want my kids to feel lack, right? I never want my children to know what it feels like to not know love, or to not hear I love you. And so I'm very intentional about my relationships. I'm intentional about things that I say. Like, I never want to be in someone's presence where they don't feel better when they leave me. Yeah. So my life is different now. Every time I do something, it's with purpose. And it's all to be in alignment with what I feel like God wants me to do. And I feel like, you know, at one point I was like, God, like I was like, do you hate me? I felt that way. I was like, God does not love me because I was just like, what did I do to deserve this? That's what I felt like. I said, I must have done something very bad, very wrong, because I felt like every time I turned around, something bad in my life was happening. So I was like, God can't love me. That mindset.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
And now my mindset is different. Like, I don't feel that way. I actually feel like everything that happened for me. And now I have shifted, and I feel like I live my life with purpose. And God only allowed me to go through that because He knew I could handle it. And now I can use my story to help others get through those things that I've been through.
Yeah, and you know, you telling that story also brought another scripture to mind. And again, I'm horrible at quoting scriptures because I never know like the number and the, you know, chapter and all that stuff. But there's also a scripture where I think they're asking Jesus, like, the disciples are like, who sinned to cause this man to be born blind? So they're looking for a cause and an effect. They're looking for a reason. But Christ is like, nobody. This happened so that God could get the glory. And so listening to your situation, it's like we never want to feel like God is just pushing us into something just to, you know, blow it up or whatever. But I think in some situations, as long as we give God that glory, because sometimes we want to try to take the glory for ourselves and say, oh, well, I did this. I pulled myself out of that. I pulled myself out of this. You know, so I think also that scripture comes to mind. I'm not saying 100% that's your situation. I'm just saying that scripture is what also comes to mind to me. So with that being said, as we're going to wrap up here, the way I like to close these out is I want to first say thank you and give your appreciation. As they say, give the people their flowers while they're here. I want to be way more intentional about that, you know, especially after my dad passed this year and, you know, my nephew last year. It's like, man, people are just, you know, left and right. I had some family members, my cousin, 2 of his uncles passed with COVID. And, you know, I hear a lot of athletes do it, but I'm like, you know what? They're right. The athletes are right in this when they sit down with each other and say, hey, I want to give you your flowers. One of the most impactful interviews I've ever seen was Kobe and Shaq, and that was even more impactful after Kobe passed back in 2020. Right. So it's like, man, so I want to hand that off to you, let you know that I think you're doing great. Want to encourage you to continue to go doing what you're doing. But with that said, are there any last words you want to give to anybody? Any story, any part of your story you want to kind of wrap up, or, you know, tie the loose end on, or just tell everybody, hey, go buy the book. You know, go buy the book if you want to hear the story. Let me tell my story real quick. One quick story. When I was reading the intro to the book, I told you this before. Reading the intro, reading the first chapter, I couldn't put the book down. Like I felt like, in so many ways, I knew the stories. I've known parts of the stories. I felt like I was just reading this thing, and I was like, it hit me because we talked about this before. I was like, this story needs a movie. And I'm sitting here like, man. So anyway, go get the book, everybody. So you close out however you, you know, I was literally couldn't put it down. So go ahead.
Thank you. I've actually been approached once about a film.
Okay.
So praying on that one. That is the right move. I just want to say, first of all, I wrote this and I was afraid to do it. I did not want to put my story out there for several reasons. number one, when you tell your story, it's not just you in the story, right? So the person that I'm speaking of, he's still here.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be fair when I told the story, because I didn't want to vilify him, because it's not about him, right? But I wanted to be able to tell my story so that I could share how it impacted me, how it affected me throughout the process, what's going on with me now. But sometimes it's very difficult to do that without sharing the parts with the people who were there, who were involved. So I felt it took a lot of work to be able to tell the story and also not make it all about this person. I had to leave a lot of stuff out that I felt like I could have shared, but I made sure that I shared what was necessary to tell the story. So I did that. But I did it for a reason. I did it so that anyone else who's struggling with depression, suicidal thoughts, anxiety, I wrote it so that they are hopeful, to know that, like, this is just a chapter, and life does not end this way. And God doesn't want you to stay in any type of darkness. So just know that you can get through all of it, because I once felt this way too. That is why I wrote the book. For no other reason. Like, I did not write it to be like, to tell on anybody or anything like that. I literally wrote it because I want to help people. So my message to everyone is that, number one, you are not your past. So whatever you have been through on your journey, that does not define who you are. And number two, where you've been does not determine where you go. So there's hope. There is hope, and you can do this.
Yeah. Wow. So basically what you're saying, part of what I heard was, this is a memoir, not a tell-all book.
Right.
Where you're talking. This is a memoir, not a tell-all. All right. Okay. I got you.
Yeah,
I got you. Because there's a difference in that. Yeah.
People think, because a memoir is basically, and number one, it's not an autobiography. An autobiography tells like your whole story from beginning to end. Memoirs capture a point in life, or several points in a lifetime, is that tell a story or have a point to it.
Like essential parts of the story.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Okay. Well, man, this has been great. I really appreciate it. So we're going to get off here, but once we're done, just hold on to the line. I want to thank everybody for watching us today, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Next on the Candidly Speaking podcast.
In my opinion, it forces you to try to block out a portion of your hurt and your pain. That gets saved up and stored up, and when it's time for you to let it go, you're letting go a lot more than just how you're feeling. Sometimes it can come out as rage, it can come out as anger. Sometimes it just comes out as a simple emotion of, just tears. And sometimes it comes out as smiles and laughs. But, to try to hold on to so much, try to block out memories, to try to make yourself, force yourself to try not to feel pain in a time like that, man.